Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here is the video that you came here for. I do want to start in the lovely city of Las Vegas, my alma mater. I think everybody knows by now, but for people who do not know, grew up in Connecticut, went to UConn, graduated from UConn, got the degree, got the piece of paper. They were playing in a regional final on Saturday night against Gonzaga. They were a 2.5-point favorite in the Betfred Sportsbook, and I will tell you, they did not win by 2.5. They won by a significantly larger margin of victory. UConn, in dominant fashion, goes out to the West region, takes care of Arkansas, takes care of Gonzaga. And now how about this? They are going to the 6th Finals Four in school history and the 6th Final Four since 1999. By the way, I was told at the wedding this weekend, the groom, Ed, who is a listener of this show, he told me that some of you don't like when UConn does well, because I get insufferable. I don't know if I get insufferable. All I do know is this is going to be a tough 10, 12 minutes as we discuss this UConn-Gonzaga game. So forgive me if I am not very fun to listen to. But let's get into the game itself because, again, I think this was, as we look at both this game, this tournament, this season for UConn as they are now again in their 6th Final Four, it was complete domination in a season in which UConn has weirdly dominated for huge stretches and struggled for a big stretch in between. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it was easy and I always saw this coming. I did not at all. I had UConn in the Elite Eight in my bracket. I did not have them going to the Final Four, but they have had amongst the most interesting seasons that I can ever remember. In November and December, they were totally dominant. They started the year 14-0, 14 wins by double figures. I think the first 13 might have been by double figures. And we're just completely dominant in every facet of the game. Went to the PK 85. They beat Alabama. They beat Oregon. They beat Iowa State. Had a couple other nice wins when they got back to the East Coast. But I just bring it up because for, I think, probably about a 6-week stretch, I think everybody thought this was the best team in college basketball. Then they get into league play and they struggled. I'd be lying if I didn't. Listen, you guys and girls listen to this show. There was a moment in time where I gave up on UConn this season, where I criticized the coaching staff. I criticized the players. I said, I think they're playing too many guys. So again, I can't sit here and pretend that I'm perfect and I saw this coming all along. But what I will also say, I watch every game, and really about late January into February, you did see this program and this team starting to turn a corner. I believe it was 8 of their final 9 that they won. Their only loss was to Creighton at Creighton. During that stretch, obviously we now know that was not a bad loss at all, but they really got rolling, got into the Big East tournament. And then outside of the opening round against Iona, have dominated this tournament. Now, as far as the Saturday game itself, a couple things stand out. The first thing I would say, I do think I'd be remiss and I'd be lying if I didn't mention the single biggest play in that game, which was Drew Timme's 4th foul. Drew Timme, All-American at Gonzaga, who, for as critical as I can be of a lot of people and a lot of things, he has been an amazing college player if this was the end of his career, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But I think when I look at the Drew Timme situation, it goes back to what I've said many times. In life, 2 things can be true. So Drew Timme, the Gonzaga star, picks up his 4th foul with 17:39 left in the second half. It was a 10-point game at that point. And I'd be lying if, as an unbiased observer, trying to remain unbiased to do my job, that I said that that wasn't a bad call against Drew Timme. That was a bad call. That was a tough call. But I also think the second thing can be true as well. I don't think that fundamentally changed the outcome of the game. May it have not been an 82-54 win against UConn? Yeah, I think if Drew Timme never picks up his 4th foul, with 17 minutes left and has to go to the bench, I don't think UConn wins by 28 points like they did on Saturday night. At the same time, Gonzaga shot 2 of 20 from 3. I don't know this for sure, but I would assume it was something close to the worst shooting performance they've had in years. On top of that, they missed 10 foul shots on Saturday night. So the Drew Timme foul sucked. but the better team won and the more dominant team won. And now UConn rolls to a Final Four, where as I'm recording, Betfred doesn't have odds out yet, but I believe they will be the favorite going into Houston. As we look ahead and really look back, let me just say this, because I do want to get to some of the Gonzaga aspects. And then we got a lot of other things to talk about outside of UConn steamrolling everybody. But I do want to take a minute. Give me a minute to share a little bit about this UConn program and specifically the incredible job that I think Dan Hurley has done with this program. Because I do think when a UConn wins on a Saturday night to go to their sixth Final Four since 1999, there's this presumption of, well, I mean, you know, of course UConn's going to the Final Four. They're UConn. That's what they do. Everybody wins at UConn. And to a fundamental degree, like, that is true. The last now three coaches, Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, and Dan Hurley, they have gone to Final Fours. The last two, Jim Calhoun and Kevin Ollie, have won national championships. And we will see if Dan Hurley can replicate the success of his two predecessors. At the same time, to say that because Dan Hurley is at UConn, that winning was guaranteed, that could not be further from the truth, okay? Because at the end of the day, I don't think people realize how tough of a rebuild Dan Hurley had when he got to UConn. I think it's, oh, they're UConn, they're always going to be good. How tough could it have been? Well, what I think a lot of people forget, yes, Kevin Ollie won a national championship in 2014. What a lot of people forget is that UConn immediately cratered as a program after that. And as we've all joked about since then, it's very clear that Shabazz Napier and Ryan Boatwright were probably the reasons that UConn won that national championship much more than Kevin Ollie. But you go back, Kevin Ollie stayed at UConn for 4 years after that national championship. Here's what he did. 2015, NIT. 2016, they make the NCAA tournament, lose in the second round. But here's the thing. They had to win games at their conference tournament. They ended up winning the conference tournament. But if they had lost in the opening round of the conference tournament, they probably don't go to the NCAA tournament that year. They hit a three-quarter court shot at the buzzer to force overtime. They end up winning, and I think double or triple overtime. And so if UConn doesn't win its opening round game of its conference tournament in 2016, they don't go to the NCAA tournament. And then 2017, UConn has a losing season. 2018, UConn has a losing season. So on the one hand, Dan Hurley inherited a program that made one NCAA tournament in the previous 4 years before he arrived. But here's the other thing I think a lot of you forget, and I know a lot of you have forgotten because a lot of you have texted me about it. During that stretch, when Dan Hurley took the UConn job, UConn was not in the Big East. So when he took this job, he didn't have Madison Square Garden, Big East tournament, Fox contract, playing against Villanova, Creighton, St. John, Seton Hall, Providence. He didn't have any of that to sell. UConn was playing in the AAC against nobodies. That's no disrespect. Houston's good. They're leaving for the Big 12. Memphis is a good program. But for the most part, you know who he was selling against? Oh, we're going to play Tulsa. Oh, we're going to play Tulane. I've told the story before on this show. I have a buddy who was an AAU coach around that time, 2016, 2017, whatever. And he always used to joke with me. He said, Aaron, you know, he had a McDonald's All-American in his program. He said, Aaron, the kid wanted to go to UConn. He goes, but he ain't playing against, I'm not letting him play against Tulsa, and I'm not letting him play against Tulane. Like, I'm not doing it. And so the kid went somewhere else, whatever. But that was what Dan Hurley inherited, and I think it's easy to forget now. It was not an easy decision to come to UConn, and there were people that told him that he shouldn't. The same year that UConn opened, Pitt opened at the same time, and there was about a 2 or 3 day stretch where it was a big thing. Like, should Dan Hurley take Pitt? Should he take UConn? Now it seems like a no-brainer. But at the time, UConn was coming off back-to-back losing seasons in the AAC with no guarantee they were getting back to the Big East. And people said, take Pitt. You're in the ACC. UConn's past might be brighter, but is their future going to be brighter than Pitt? Oh, by the way, I had people, and people don't believe me when I say this. When the UConn job opened up, Dan Hurley had it rolling at Rhode Island. I had people tell me, literally, people in the media, smart people, well, at this point, is UConn really a better job than Rhode Island? Like, it sounds crazy now. And it probably was dumb back then, and I definitely yelled at people that told me that. But it wasn't like out of the realm of possibility. He had 2 or 3 really good seasons before he left Rhode Island. UConn is in the AAC. They're struggling. And people were sitting there saying, like, should you really leave that job for UConn? So credit to Dan Hurley. And then here's the other part. He believed in UConn when nobody else did, but he got others to believe as well. He got others to believe in the brand, others to believe what it could be even before the Big East. Now, the Big East certainly helped. He would even, I mean, he has acknowledged it. He has acknowledged it many times. But at the same time, I'm just telling you right now, so think about some of the kids that he got to commit during the time when there was no Big East certainty. James Bouknight, who's now in the NBA, one of his first marquee commits, committed when UConn was still in the AAC. Andre Jackson, a key player on this team, committed before they ever played a Big East game. He committed a month or two after the Big East was announced. So basically his entire recruitment was with UConn as an AAC school. Adama Sanogo, the star of this tournament for UConn alongside Jordan Hawkins, committed to UConn before UConn ever played a Big East game. By the way, Jordan Hawkins committed to UConn, now a sophomore, at a time when UConn had not won tournament games. And so you go on and on and on. That's what's kind of cool, right? Is in this transfer portal world, NIL world, everything's fast and furious. You flip over rosters like it's nothing. UConn's had to work to get to this moment. It hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been easy for Hurley even when he got to UConn. Gets there off back-to-back losing seasons in 2018 and 2019, or 2017, 2018. His first year, they have a losing season in 2019. Then his second year, it was 2017, 2018, they had losing seasons. His first year, they have a losing season in 2019. 2020, they struggle early. They get hot late. That was the year of the famous clip that you may have seen where he said, "You better get us now because we coming." That was 2020. And UConn got hot at the end of the season, but they wouldn't have made the tournament unless they had won their conference tournament. Then in 2021, in the bubble year, they make the tournament, but lose in the first round. Then last year, they make the tournament and lose in the first round in New Mexico State. And so this has been a process. This has been a journey, but I give Dan Hurley so much credit for believing in this program when it wasn't always easy to, and getting others to believe in this program when it wasn't easy either. And finally, I give Dan Hurley credit for owning both who he is, but who UConn is as well. This is one last thing that I find interesting from the UConn perspective, then we'll get to Gonzaga. But from the UConn perspective, this year hasn't been easy. And outside of, the last 4 games and early in the season, it hasn't been an easy journey. And one thing that I respect about Dan Hurley, he's talked about this a lot. He does not run from the expectations. He embraces them. And it's interesting, right? Because obviously we've talked a lot this season specifically about the future of, say, a program like Kentucky. And we've talked about, okay, which kind of coaches would embrace the expectations of Kentucky and which coaches would run from them. And I bring it up because there's a lot of people that you Kentucky fans think you want as your next head coach that I maybe have a little bit of insight into, and I can tell you they would crash and burn under the expectations. And so I bring it up because I don't know if UConn's quite Kentucky. I think Kentucky's probably the most pressure-filled job in college basketball, but UConn's pretty close. You can't just go to UConn, make the tournament, and everybody's happy. That might fly at Notre Dame. That might fly at Penn State. That might fly wherever. It does not fly at UConn. You got to get to the tournament and win. And Dan Hurley's talked about that. He said, listen, the noise gets a little bit louder at this type of school, but this is what I signed up for. This is what all these players signed up for. And that's what I love about this specific team. It hasn't always been easy. There has been adversity, and they've been able to overcome it. So UConn is headed to the Final Four in Houston. I will be there. We'll figure out coverage when I get there. Again, UConn fans, we're going to try to throw a party. DM me, hit me up on Twitter at Aaron_Torres if you want in. But really excited for the Huskies.